The conference room door wasn't fully closed. Amara stood frozen in the hallway, her cleaning cart positioned awkwardly against the marble wall. She had only meant to empty the trash bins before the morning meeting, but the voices inside stopped her cold. Once he signs tomorrow, the company transfers to us, every asset, every account. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized that voice, Mr. Chen, the CFO who always smiled at her in the mornings. And Adrian? Another voice, Mr. Okonkwo, the operations director. Adrian will have nothing. He'll be bankrupt by Monday. The legal team made sure the documents look clean. He won't know what hit him until it's too late. Laughter echoed through the crack in the door. Amara's hands trembled as she gripped the mop handle. Adrian Nwosu, the CEO, the man who owned Titan Industries, one of Nigeria's largest manufacturing empires, the man whose house she cleaned 6 days a week, the same man who never looked at her long enough to remember her name. She should walk away. This wasn't her business. She was just a housemaid, invisible, powerless. What could she possibly do? But something in her chest tightened, something that remembered another betrayal, another powerful man destroyed by people he trusted. Her father. Amara backed away from the door silently, her pulse racing. She had 12 hours before Adrian signed those documents. 12 hours to decide if she would stay silent like everyone else or risk everything to warn a man who didn't even know she existed. The employment agency office smelled like stale coffee and desperation. Amara sat in the plastic chair, her worn handbag clutched in her lap, watching the receptionist type slowly on an ancient computer. "You're qualified for domestic work only," the woman said without looking up. "No formal education beyond secondary school, no professional references." "I'm a hard worker," Amara said quietly. "I learn fast." "Everyone says that." The receptionist finally glanced at her. "You understand housemaid positions don't pay much, and with the economy now, employers are very selective." Amara understood. She had understood since the day her father's business collapsed 3 years ago. Since the day the investors he trusted drained his accounts and disappeared. Since the day he suffered a massive stroke from the shock and never woke up. Since her mother died 6 months later from grief and untreated diabetes. Since Amara, at 24, found herself completely alone with nothing but debts and a rented room in Ajagunle she could barely afford. "I'll take anything," Amara said. The receptionist sighed. "There's one position, very wealthy household, Banana Island. The pay is decent, but the employer is demanding. Adrian Nwosu, he owns Titan Industries." Amara's breath caught. She had heard of Titan Industries, everyone in Lagos had. Manufacturing, real estate, imports, a billion-naira empire. "He's a widower," the receptionist continued, "lives alone in a massive house, goes through housemaids like tissue paper. The last 3 quit within 2 months. He doesn't tolerate mistakes." "I don't make mistakes," Amara said. That wasn't entirely true. But she needed this job desperately. 2 days later, Amara stood at the gates of the largest house she had ever seen. White walls, manicured gardens, a fountain in the courtyard. Security guards checked her identification 3 times before allowing her inside. The head of household staff, Mrs. Adeyemi, was a stern woman in her 50s who looked Amara up and down with obvious disapproval. "You're very young," Mrs. Adeyemi said. "Mr. Nwosu prefers staff who know their place and don't cause drama." "I'm not here for drama," Amara replied. "I'm here to work." Mrs. Adeyemi showed her through the mansion. 20 rooms, 6 bathrooms, a home office larger than Amara's entire former apartment. Everything was expensive, pristine, cold. Mr. Nwosu works from 5 in the morning until midnight most days, Mrs. Adeyemi explained. He doesn't like interruptions, he doesn't like noise, he doesn't like staff who ask personal questions or try to be friendly. You clean, you cook what's requested, you stay invisible. Understood? Understood. Your quarters are in the back, you have Sundays off, your salary is 90,000 naira monthly. Any problems, you report to me, not Mr. Nwosu. He doesn't deal with staff directly. 90,000 naira? More than Amara had earned in her previous 3 jobs combined. Enough to pay her rent, send money to her younger brother in university, maybe even save a little. She couldn't afford to lose this position. The first time Amara saw Adrian Nwosu, she was cleaning the living room windows. He walked past her carrying a briefcase and a phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what the suppliers say, renegotiate or find new ones. I need those shipments by Friday. He was tall, perhaps in his late 30s, with sharp features and an expression of permanent irritation. His suit probably cost more than Amara's annual salary. He didn't glance in her direction even once. She might as well have been furniture. Over the following weeks, Amara learned the rhythm of the household. Adrian woke at 4:45 every morning. Coffee, black, no sugar, served in the home office by 5:15. Breakfast at 6:30, always the same. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, fresh fruit. He left for the office by 7:30 and returned between 9 and 11 at night. He never smiled. He rarely spoke except to give instructions, and he went through staff the way he went through business contracts, quickly and without sentiment. In her first month, Amara watched 2 other workers get dismissed, a gardener who trimmed the hedges incorrectly, a driver who arrived 10 minutes late. Adrian Nwosu was not cruel. He was simply exacting. He expected perfection because he gave perfection to his business. There was no room for mediocrity in his world. Amara kept her head down and worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She woke before Adrian, ensuring everything was ready. She learned his preferences without being told. She anticipated needs before they arose. She stayed invisible. But she watched him, and what she saw made something inside her ache with recognition. Adrian Nwosu was lonely. Not in the way people complained about loneliness, but in the way he sat at the massive dining table designed for 12 people, eating alone every single night. In the way his phone rang constantly with business calls but never with friends. In the way he walked through rooms filled with expensive art and antiques but paused at none of them. He had built an empire, but he had no one to share it with. His wife had died 4 years ago in a car accident, Mrs. Adeyemi told Amara one evening. No children, no close family, just business partners and employees and an empty mansion that echoed with absence. Amara understood that loneliness. She had felt it every day since her parents died. But understanding didn't change anything. She was still just the housemaid, and he was still the billionaire who never learned her name. Then came the morning she heard the voices in the conference room. Amara couldn't eat that evening. She prepared Adrian's dinner as usual, a perfectly grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, and left it in the dining room. Then she retreated to her quarters and sat on her narrow bed, staring at the wall. Tomorrow morning, Adrian would sign documents that would destroy him. The conversation she'd overheard played repeatedly in her mind. Mr. Chen and Mr. Okonkwo weren't just planning betrayal. They had orchestrated it meticulously. False financial reports, manipulated contracts, legal documents designed to look legitimate but transfer everything, Adrian's entire company, his assets, his life's work, into their control. It was exactly what had happened to her father. Different details, same story, trusted partners, hidden documents, one signature, total destruction. Her father never recovered. The betrayal broke something fundamental inside him. When he realized the people he'd trusted had stolen everything, his heart simply gave out. Amara couldn't let that happen again, but what could she do? If she told Adrian, would he even believe her? She was a housemaid with no proof, accusing his most trusted executives. He'd probably think she was crazy or making trouble. He'd fire her immediately, and she needed this job desperately. Her younger brother Michael's university fees were due next month. Her rent was already 2 weeks late. If she lost this position, she'd have nothing. The smart thing was to stay silent, protect herself, survive. But when Amara closed her eyes, she saw her father's face the day he realized he'd been betrayed. The way his hands shook as he read the bank statements showing empty accounts. The way his voice broke when he whispered, "They took everything." She couldn't stay silent. At midnight, Amara made her decision. She would tell Adrian everything she'd heard. She would make him listen. And if he fired her for it, at least she'd tried. At least she wouldn't carry the guilt of watching another good man destroyed by betrayal. She waited until morning, her stomach churning with anxiety. Adrian followed his usual routine, appearing in the dining room at exactly 6:30 for breakfast. Amara stood in the doorway, her heart pounding so violently she could hear it in her ears. "Sir?" He glanced up briefly from his tablet. "Yes?" "I need to speak with you. It's important." "Tell Mrs. Adayemi I don't handle staff issues." "It's not a staff issue, sir. It's about your business." Now she had his attention. Adrian set down his tablet and looked at her properly for the first time in the 3 months she'd worked there. "You're the new housemaid," he said. "Yes, sir. Amara, I've been here 3 months." "What about my business?" Amara took a deep breath. "Yesterday evening, I was cleaning the executive floor. The conference room door wasn't fully closed. I heard Mr. Chen and Mr. Okonkwo talking. They're planning to betray you, sir. The documents you're signing today, they're not what you think they are. They're designed to transfer your company to them." Adrian's expression didn't change. "What exactly did you hear?" Amara repeated the conversation, word for word. Her memory was excellent, sharpened by years of poverty, where remembering details meant survival. When she finished, Adrian leaned back in his chair. His face revealed nothing. "That's quite an accusation," he said quietly. "I know what I heard, sir. Chen and Okonkwo have been with me for 10 years. They built this company alongside me. Why would they betray me now?" "I don't know, sir. But I know what betrayal sounds like." Amara's voice shook slightly. "My father owned a small manufacturing business. His partners did the same thing. False documents, one signature. He lost everything. He died from the shock." Something flickered across Adrian's face. Not quite sympathy, but recognition. "What's your name again?" "Amara, sir. Amara Okafor." "Amara." He said it like he was testing the word. "You realize if you're wrong about this, you're accusing 2 executives of serious crimes. You could be sued for defamation." "I'm not wrong, sir." "And if I investigate and find nothing, you'll be fired immediately." "I understand." Adrian studied her for a long moment. Amara forced herself to meet his gaze, even though every instinct told her to look down, to remember her place. Finally, he picked up his phone. "Cancel my morning meeting. Tell them I'm dealing with an urgent matter." Amara's legs nearly buckled with relief. Adrian didn't do things halfway. Within 2 hours, He had his personal lawyer and an independent auditor at the house. Amara was questioned repeatedly about exactly what she'd heard, when, where, and how. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Kioma, was skeptical. "Mr. Nwosu, this is a serious accusation based on overheard conversation from a domestic worker." "I'm aware," Adrian said, "but I don't ignore potential threats. Examine the documents I was supposed to sign today, every clause, every word. Compare them to the original agreements." The auditor worked through lunch. Amara stayed in her quarters, unable to settle. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Either she'd saved Adrian's company or destroyed her own life with false accusations. At 3 in the afternoon, Mrs. Adeyemi summoned her to the Home Office. Adrian sat behind his massive desk. Guillaume and the auditor stood nearby. The atmosphere was tense. "Sit down," Adrian said. Amara sat in the leather chair across from him, feeling absurdly small. Adrian slid a document across the desk. "Do you know what this is?" "No, sir." "This is the contract I was supposed to sign today. It looks legitimate, a standard restructuring agreement, but hidden in Section 7, subsection C, is a clause that transfers majority ownership of Titan Industries to a holding company controlled by Chen and Okonkwo." Amara's breath caught. "In Section 12, Adrian continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "There's another clause that makes me personally liable for all company debts while removing my access to company accounts. Essentially, I would sign away my company and inherit all its financial obligations." Kioma spoke up. "We've examined your financial records. For the past 8 months, Chen and Okonkwo have been systematically inflating company debts and diverting profits into offshore accounts. The company appears financially troubled on paper, but is actually highly profitable. Once you signed this document, you'd be bankrupt while they walked away with billions." The room fell silent. Adrian looked at Amara. His expression was unreadable. "You saved my company. More than that, you saved my entire life." "I just told you what I heard, sir." "You did more than that." Adrian stood and walked to the window overlooking the garden. "You risked your job, your livelihood, to warn a man who didn't even know your name. Why?" Amara thought about lying, about giving some noble reason. But she was tired of pretending. "Because I watched my father destroyed by betrayal," she said quietly. "I watched him die from it, and I couldn't watch it happen to someone else. Not when I could have prevented it." Adrian turned to face her. For the first time since she'd met him, his expression softened. "I'm sorry about your father." "Thank you, sir." "What happened to his partners, the ones who betrayed him?" "Nothing. They disappeared with the money. My father couldn't afford lawyers. He couldn't fight them. He just gave up." "That won't happen here," Adrian said firmly. "Chen and Okonkwo will face consequences." He was wrong about one thing, though. They didn't just face consequences, they faced absolute destruction. Adrian handled the betrayal with surgical precision. He didn't confront Chen and Okonkwo immediately. Instead, he pretended nothing was wrong. He attended the meeting that afternoon, smiled, discussed business, and told them he needed one more day to review the documents before signing. Meanwhile, his lawyer filed criminal charges: fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. The police arrested both men at their homes the following morning. The media erupted. "Billion-naira betrayal. Titan Industries executives arrested for fraud." The scandal dominated headlines for weeks. Chen and Okonkwo, who had presented themselves as respectable businessmen, were revealed as criminals who had been planning the theft for over a year. Evidence emerged showing they'd done this before, to other companies, other partnerships. They were professionals at corporate betrayal, but this time they'd underestimated two things: Adrian's thoroughness and Amara's courage. The trial was swift. Both men were convicted and sentenced to 12 years in prison. They were ordered to return every naira they'd stolen, plus damages. Adrian recovered his company. More than that, he rebuilt it stronger. He restructured management, implemented new oversight protocols, and ensured that what happened to him would never happen to any business owner under his watch. But something else changed too, something unexpected. Adrian noticed Amara not as the invisible housemaid, but as the woman who had risked everything to save him. 3 weeks after the arrests, he called her to his office again.
"Sit down, Amara." She sat, still nervous in his presence, despite everything. "I've been thinking," Adrian said. "You have something that most people lack: integrity, courage, the ability to see what others miss." He paused. "I don't want you working as a housemaid anymore." Amara's heart sank. He was firing her. "I want you working in the company," Adrian continued. "I need people I can trust, people who will tell me the truth, even when it's difficult." Amara stared at him. "Sir, I don't have business training. I didn't even finish university." "You have something better. You have character. The rest can be learned." Adrian slid a folder across the desk. "This is a job offer, junior analyst position in my personal office. Salary is 300,000 naira monthly. You'll work directly with me, reviewing contract."
Attending meetings, learning the business. 300,000 naira. Amara's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "Why would you do this for me?" she whispered. "Because you did something for me when you had every reason not to. Because you saw injustice and spoke up when silence would have been easier. Because—" Adrian's voice softened. "Because I understand what it's like to lose a parent to betrayal. My mother died when I was 15. My father's business partner stole everything after her death. We lost our home, our savings, everything. I swore I'd never let that happen to anyone again if I could prevent it." Amara finally understood. They weren't just employer and employee. They were two people who had survived the same darkness. "I accept," she said. "Thank you, sir. Adrian. If you're working with me, call me Adrian." The transformation wasn't immediate. Amara struggled at first. The business world was foreign territory. She sat in meetings understanding only half of what was discussed. She made mistakes, asked stupid questions, felt constantly out of her depth. But Adrian was patient. He explained things when she didn't understand. He gave her books to read, courses to take, mentors to learn from. And slowly, Amara began to understand something crucial. Business wasn't as complicated as people pretended. It was about people, trust, relationships, and reading situations correctly. Skills she'd developed from a lifetime of surviving poverty. She learned to spot inconsistencies in financial reports, to ask questions others were too intimidated to ask, to notice when people's words didn't match their actions. Adrian began relying on her input more and more. She became his second set of eyes, catching problems before they became disasters. "You see things differently," he told her one evening as they reviewed contracts. "Most people in this business think in numbers and percentages. You think in human behavior. It makes you better at spotting deception." Amara smiled. "I had good teachers, poverty and betrayal. The worst teachers make the best students." Something was shifting between them. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that crossed professional lines. but a genuine respect was growing. Friendship, even. Adrian started asking her opinion on matters beyond business. He told her about his late wife, about the loneliness of building an empire with no one to share it with. Amara told him about her parents, about Michael's struggles in university, about the guilt she carried for surviving when they didn't. They understood each other in ways neither had expected. 8 months after Amara's promotion, Michael graduated from university. Amara used her savings, supplemented by a generous bonus from Adrian, to attend the ceremony in Ibadan. When Michael hugged her, tears streaming down his face, he whispered, "Papa would be so proud of you." Amara finally believed it. The girl who'd been invisible, the housemaid no one noticed, had become someone who mattered, someone who made a difference. But the story wasn't finished. It happened on a Thursday evening. Amara was working late with Adrian, reviewing bids for a new manufacturing facility. The office was quiet. Most staff had gone home. The phone rang. Adrian's security team. "Sir, we have a situation. 2 men tried to breach the compound. They're claiming to have business with you." Adrian frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone. Remove them." "Sir, they're armed, and they're specifically asking for Amara Okafor." Amara's blood went cold. Adrian stood immediately. "Lock down the compound. Call the police. Now." Within minutes, police arrived, but the men were gone, disappeared into Lagos traffic. The security footage told the story. 2 armed men demanding entry, when refused, making threats. "Tell Amara Okafor her time is running out. Tell her Chen sends his regards." Chen, from prison. The investigation moved quickly. Chen and Okonkwo, from behind bars, had hired criminals to intimidate Amara. The message was clear: punishment for testifying against them. Adrian was furious in a way Amara had never seen. "They come after you, they come after me," he said, grimly. "They'll regret this." He hired personal security for Amara. 24-hour protection. He moved her into a secure apartment building owned by his company. He made sure the police investigation moved at maximum speed. But more than that, he was there, every day, checking on her, making sure she felt safe, reminding her that she wasn't alone. "I'm not worth all this trouble," Amara said one evening as they sat in his office, reviewing security protocols. Adrian looked at her like she'd said something absurd. "You saved my company, my life. You think I'd abandon you now?" "I'm just—" "Don't." His voice was firm. "Don't say you're just anything. You're Amara Okafor. You're brave and brilliant, and you matter. To this company, to me." Something in his tone made Amara's heart skip. To me, not to the company, to him. She looked at Adrian properly, perhaps for the first time. Not as the intimidating CEO, not as the employer who'd given her a chance, but as a man who'd been through his own darkness and somehow still chose kindness, a man who'd noticed her when no one else had. "Adrian," she said softly, "why do you care so much?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being just an employee. You became someone I couldn't imagine my life without." The trial of the hired thugs was brief. Both men were convicted. Chen and Okonkwo received additional sentences for conspiracy and witness intimidation, but something more important happened during those difficult weeks. Amara realized she'd fallen in love with Adrian Nwosu, not because of his money or his power, but because of who he was when those things were stripped away. A lonely man who'd built walls around himself after loss, just like she had. A man who valued loyalty above profit. A man who protected those who were vulnerable instead of exploiting them. She didn't know if he felt the same way. The professional boundary between them felt impossible to cross. Until one evening, 3 months after the attack, when everything changed. They were working late again, a pattern that had become routine. Adrian closed his laptop and looked at her. "Amara, I need to tell you something." She set down her pen. "What is it?" "For 4 years I've lived in that house alone. I convinced myself I preferred it that way. No complications, no pain, no risk of losing someone again." He paused.
"Then you walked into my life and changed everything." Amara's breath caught. "You started as my housemaid," Adrian continued. "Someone I barely noticed. Then you became the person who saved my company. Then my most trusted advisor. And now—" He stood and walked around the desk to stand in front of her. "Now you're the person I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. The person whose opinion matters more than anyone else's. The person I can't imagine my life without." Amara stood slowly. "Adrian, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. I'm saying that somewhere between you warning me about betrayal and you refusing to be intimidated by threats, I fell completely in love with you." His voice softened. "I know there's a power imbalance. I know this could be complicated. If you don't feel the same way—"
"We'll never speak of this again, but I had to tell you." Amara felt tears burning her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming emotion. "You want to know what I see when I look at you?" she said quietly. "I see a man who gave a poor housemaid a chance when he didn't have to, who believed her when everyone else would have dismissed her, who protected her when she was threatened, who taught her that she was worth something." She took a breath. "I've loved you for months, Adrian. I just thought you'd never see me that way." "How could I not see you?" Adrian reached for her hands. "You're the brightest thing in my life." The kiss was inevitable. Gentle at first, then deeper. Years of loneliness melting away for both of them. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" Amara whispered. "Now we stop hiding from each other, from the world." He smiled. "Now I get to introduce you not as my employee, but as the woman I love." The wedding was small, intimate, just close friends and Michael, who walked Amara down the aisle with tears streaming down his face. "Papa would be so happy," he whispered, as he handed her to Adrian. Amara believed it. Her father had wanted her to find someone who valued her, not for what she could provide, but for who she was. Adrian was that person. As they exchanged vows, Amara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From poverty, to a housemaid position, to saving a company, to becoming a businesswoman, to standing here, marrying a man who saw her worth when she barely saw it herself. But the story didn't end with a wedding. 6 months later, Amara launched her own initiative. A foundation that provided business training and startup capital to young people from poor backgrounds. Young people like she had been, invisible and overlooked, but full of potential. She named it the Okafor Foundation after her father. Adrian funded it generously, but more than that, he stood beside her at every event, introducing her not as his wife, but as the founder and visionary behind the organization. At the launch event, Amara stood at the podium facing a room full of young people who looked exactly like she had 2 years ago, desperate, hungry, invisible. "I know what it's like to feel powerless," she told them, "to work 3 jobs and still struggle, to watch people who should protect you betray you, to feel like no one sees you or values you." The room was silent. But I also know this, Amara continued.
Your current circumstances don't define your future. Your courage does. Your integrity does. Your willingness to speak up when it matters, even when it's terrifying. She looked at Adrian, standing at the side of the room, his eyes full of pride. I was a housemaid who overheard a conversation. I could have stayed silent. It would have been safer. But I spoke up. And that single act of courage changed everything. Not just for the CEO I warned, but for me, for my entire life. She leaned forward. So here's what I want you to remember. You are not invisible. You are not powerless. You are not defined by your poverty or your circumstances. You are defined by your choices, by your courage, by what you do when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. The applause was thunderous. Later that evening, back in their home,
The mansion that had once felt cold and empty but now felt warm, Amara stood with Adrian on the balcony overlooking Lagos. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked. "Starting as a housemaid instead of something more prestigious?" Amara thought about it. "No, because being a housemaid taught me something crucial, that every person, regardless of their position, sees things others don't. That the people we overlook often have the most important insights, that poverty doesn't mean lack of wisdom." She turned to face him. "If I hadn't been a housemaid cleaning that hallway, if I hadn't overheard that conversation, if I hadn't had the courage to speak up despite my fear, where would we be?" Adrian pulled her close. "I'd be bankrupt, probably destroyed, definitely alone. And I'd still be invisible." "You were never invisible, Amara. I just wasn't looking properly." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Lagos glitter in the darkness. 2 years ago, Amara Okafor was a poor housemaid no one noticed, a girl with no prospects, no power, no voice. Now she was Amara Nwosu, businesswoman, philanthropist, wife, advocate. But more importantly, she was proof that courage matters more than circumstances, that speaking up, even when terrified, can change everything, that the invisible people society overlooks often hold the power to save those who seem untouchable. Her father would be proud. She was finally proud of herself. And as Adrian kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you," Amara knew, with absolute certainty, that she had made the right choice that morning when she decided to warn a CEO who didn't even know her name. Sometimes one act of courage is all it takes to transform 2 lives forever. 5 years later, the Okafor Foundation had helped over 2,000 young people start businesses. Michael was working as an engineer, married, expecting his first child. Chen and Okonkwo were still in prison, their appeals exhausted. And Amara stood in the same conference room where she'd once overheard the conversation that changed everything. But this time, she wasn't cleaning. She was leading a meeting about the foundation's expansion into 3 more states. Adrian watched from the doorway, smiling. After the meeting, a young woman approached Amara. She was maybe 20, dressed in a cheap but clean outfit, clutching a folder nervously. "Mrs. Nwosu, I just wanted to say thank you. I received a scholarship from your foundation last year. I just opened my first business, a small tailoring shop. Because of you, I'm not invisible anymore." Amara felt tears sting her eyes. She pulled the young woman into a hug. "You were never invisible," Amara whispered. "You just needed someone to see you." As the young woman left, Adrian joined Amara. "You're changing lives," he said softly. "We're changing lives," Amara corrected. "You gave me the chance. I'm just passing it forward. That's why I love you." They walked out together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Because they'd learned the most important truth, that power doesn't come from wealth or position. It comes from courage, from integrity, from refusing to stay silent when speaking up could save someone, from being willing to risk everything for what's right. That's the kind of power that transforms lives, and that's the kind of power that lasts forever. And that's the story of how a housemaid nobody noticed saved an empire and found her own kingdom in the process.